So, hello everybody. I'm really excited to be speaking to Dr. Isabel Tarling tonight. For me, when I came across the research that she'd done in terms of taking Bloom's taxonomy and the way that she'd adapted it and changed it, turning it horizontally, and then looking at how we as teachers actually look at the way we teach, and also how we use technology, for me was just so interesting. So I am super excited to be sharing with you this evening in terms of how that can really impact you as a teacher. For me, I think it's how we use technology in our classroom should not just be the sake of using technology. It should relate to the pedagogy we're teaching, how our teaching and learning strategies work, and the technology must just seamlessly work within the space. So for me, looking at this model was super exciting. So Isabel, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. I am really excited to be chatting to you about your absolute brainwave. Can you tell me how you came about this idea?
Hi, hello everybody, and it's so lovely to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of the work I've been doing. Lots of people have been doing with me. So what we did was we started in 2014, 2015, and wanting to, as a teacher, I always thought that technology can be used in one way. And I don't know if you did the same, but when I started with technology, I was teaching Word and PowerPoint, and my students needed to know how to change fonts and make things Comic Sans and make a rainbow word. I cringe when I think that's how I used to teach technology integration. And then I did quite a lot of research, and one of the studies that I was very fortunate to be part of was to study how technology can be integrated into schools in different ways, and to study it. The study was about the readiness of the schools to integrate technology into the classrooms. So what I did was I worked from the richest schools in Cape Town, where they have seamless integration of devices. Every child has 3 different devices that they can use at any time of the night or day, and it will be online at the school specifically. So high streaming, high bandwidth, to schools in the northern part of the Western Cape where they literally don't have even one bar. They don't even have edge. And this teacher in the school had won the iPad of the year, the teacher with the iPad of the year award with these projects with the students. And so I looked at all these classrooms in between, from literally from Table Mountain through the Karoo, Beaufort West, all these little door pieces, and found, what do the teachers do in the classrooms when they integrate technology? And interviewed a lot of teachers, or surveyed 2,000 odd participants to find out what they did. And what we came out with, we could start seeing different patterns like you do when you do research. And then I started thinking that there must be a simple way to represent this. And very often in the academic halls, we tend to think very theoretically. We tend to think that if we make something really, really complex, then it's going to make us sound really, really clever. So having been a teacher, it's so difficult often to access really complex theories and use them in your classroom. So one of the things I really wanted to do was to create a tool for teachers that they could understand technology integration and use it in their own classrooms. And for me, technology integration is never about the tool. It's always about the teaching. And how do I teach when I have a device or when I don't have the device? When beautiful ESCOM comes and cuts all our power, how am I still teaching at the end of the day? And so that's when we came up with the teaching change frame, and using it as a tool to say, how can I teach with or without technology and improve my teaching with or without technology? So the technology isn't the focus, it's the teaching and the learning that takes place. So
I agree with you completely from that point of view. So many people use technology just as this plaster or this thing on top, or even as a babysitting kind of thing. And that's not why we're using technology. Technology is a tool to enhance, to get across a message, build context and build knowledge and help those kinds of things with what we're trying to teach, not just as an add-on kind of solution. So I agree with you completely in terms of that. So do you want to go into your frame? Do you want to show us what it looks like?
I just want to pause just for one quick second and add to what you're saying. I don't know if you know, in the Western Cape Education Department, the focus is very often talking around if our impact doesn't land in the classroom, what is it that we're actually doing? And that's what this is all about.
Yes.
Director Karen Dudley, she said this so poignantly at one of literally the last event before lockdown last year. We had a launch of something, and she said, if your impact doesn't land in the classroom, whatever it is you're doing, why are you doing it? And that's the challenge of this. So you can show it and we can look at it.
Okay.
If you want to
I'll bring it up. Yep,
so
there it is.
Yeah, there we go. So this is a very, very simplified version of this. And, there's this, and again, I've only read this word. So if I'm saying this word incorrectly, please don't laugh too loud. But there's Occam's razor. And Occam's razor says that if you have if you have 10 different ways of explaining something, choose the simplest way of explaining it. I'm paraphrasing. So what I did was we could see when we did the research, when I analyzed all this data from all these 2,000 odd participants, I looked at what they were doing in their classrooms, and I used on the CBAM, it's called the concerns-based adoption model. The CBAM has these layers of you going up on the vertical line that says, I'm a non-user, I don't use technology at all. That's where it starts here at the bottom. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yes,
right at the bottom,
you can see your mouse.
So I don't use any technology. I don't think about it. I'm not using it at all. Then I go up a little bit and I start using it, and my kids in my class can maybe use a phone to look up a word or something like that. So you're just starting to use it at a very, very low level. Then we get to this point here where you're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. And as you go up with this vertical line, you become more comfortable. You use technology in increasingly complex ways. So this vertical line is the concerns-based adoption model's levels of use of technology. If you know, you might know the SAMR model. The SAMR model starts here at the middle and it works its way up. If you think of TPAC, TPAC starts here at the middle and it works its way up. So all the models that we use generally start in the middle from the horizontal bar and works its way up. And the assumption is that if you don't use technology, your teaching isn't up to scratch, because technology, only when you start using technology can we then diagnose where you are in the world. And if we look at the incredible work that teachers do without technology, that throws everything out. It kind of ignores that there's load shedding and the telecom lines were stolen and there was, and it ignores all of that reality. So I wanted to have a way of saying, but there's great teaching that happens without technology as well.
Yes.
And so that's why we've got this above the line and below the line, so that we can capture the reality. And then I needed to find a way to try and explain the horizontal movement from moving from one space to another space. And I remember thinking about this and planning this and how can I do it, and not finding any joy until at 26 minutes past 4 one morning, a Sunday morning, I woke up with a start, and it was, wham, throw blooms on its side. And I threw blooms on its side. I remember still talking to my supervisor at the time and excitedly texting him, not at 4 in the morning, but excitedly texting him, we must throw blooms on its side. And I still don't know if he knew what I was talking about. But then when we got there, I could explain we need to put blooms on a horizontal bar.
Yes.
that can move from the left to the right, so that we can show some form of progression. And of course, if you've got a different way of explaining this, you can just insert it. And if you don't want to use blooms, you can put in something else there that can show that movement from left to right. And then what we mean by that is a teacher that's in this space on the left side of the equation. Now, I'm trying to think now if this is the viewer's left or if it's my right. And I'm just going to say on A and D, okay? So the teacher that's in this space is often the teacher that will use direct instruction. And I'm very, very pertinent to say this. Great teachers use direct instruction. Don't hear me and say, this is not a great way of teaching. I'm saying in direct instruction, we very often focus on remembering and understanding and getting facts across and getting our students to understand what it is we want them to do. Direct instruction uses those kind of tools, okay? And then on my right, I'm hoping it's the viewers, it's probably the viewers left then. Now we have here where it's quadrant C and D. Here we have a space where the teaching changes and it becomes much more constructivist teaching, inquiry-based teaching, problem-based teaching, where the teacher takes a step back and isn't the focal point in the classroom, but the students become the ones who do the work, a lot of the work. So they would be creating and making and innovating and analyzing and evaluating. So that's the kind of movement I wanted to show, from being a direct instruction teacher on the A and D quadrants and to being a teacher who's using more of a constructionist approach in C and B. And some people call it a teaching-centered approach on D and A, and other people call it a learning-centered approach on C and B. So you can think of it like that as well.
Don't you also think that sometimes people flick between the different quadrants even within a lesson? Because you might be working in a part where you're looking at giving instructions and working from that point of view, and then you move into a constructivist type of activity. So even within just a lesson, you might be moving from quadrant to quadrant.
And that is the beauty of a teacher who has experience, who has that rich pedagogical knowledge of, I have taught for 15 years and I know how to move from being in a direct space, a direct instruction space where I am the focal point, to getting the students to work in groups, to go and analyze text. So I know as a teacher, experienced pedagogue, I can move between these spaces. And very often we find in the hallowed academic halls that there is this assumption that the older teachers are the ones who are not going to integrate technologies as effectively as the younger teachers. And I don't know if someone has heard this, but what I often find, it's quite the opposite. It's the teacher, the pedagogical richness, who's able to say, my lesson must start in quadrant A, then I'm going to move to quadrant D, then I'm going to move to quadrant C. Or and you've got this movement and this creative space where you can, we call it flow theory. You get into your groove and you can move through these quadrants at ease.
Yeah, I agree with you completely there, that the assumption that somebody who's been teaching for a longer period of time won't take on the technology or be able to explore the different kinds of learning, that often isn't the case.
Exactly. And then being a typical teacher, you had those kids in your class that you just loved. You absolutely just loved. So I use their names for the quadrant. So I want to just start off here. So Anna is, and I do remember Anna with great fondness. Anna is in quadrant A, and so she doesn't use technology, and she teaches with her chalkboard, with her whiteboard, with posters and pictures, and that's your teacher in quadrant A. Now, there might be technologies available, but Anna feels, you know what, I've got a class of 70, they're all over the show, I can't actually do technology right now. I'm happy to just teach in quadrant A for now. So that's your teacher, Anna. Now your teacher, Darian, and I remember my dear Darian so fondly. When I taught him, he was the most energetic little boy I'd ever taught in my life. But anyway, so teacher Darian is in quadrant D. And in quadrant D, he still teaches with a direct instruction, but instead of using a chalkboard and a whiteboard, he replaces it with a projector. Or he replaces the writing of finishing worksheets with a Google form or a Microsoft form. So the students are still doing quantitatively the same job, but he replaces it with technology. So, and he's very much the focal point. He tells the students, open this link and answer the questions when you watch the video. Or if you're teaching in a digital space, you would say, I want you to go and look at these websites and research these websites and then make me a poster of it. So it's very much directed by the teacher what happens when it happens. So that's your teacher Anna and teacher Darian. And when teacher Anna wants to move to a space where teacher Darian is, she's going to say to herself something like, okay, I'm going to learn how to use PowerPoint. And when I know PowerPoint, I'm going to do a PowerPoint lesson with a projector. And I'm going to have Darian in the background that comes and helps me to just set up the projector so that I can do it with my 70 students. So when she feels confident to use the technology, she's going to move up to quadrant D. But we can see there's not a pedagogical movement. Her pedagogy stays the same. She's still got 70 kids in her class. She still has to teach with the sun shining on the board and she can't see. And then she realizes, oh, she needs curtains. And then she doesn't have money for curtains, so she goes and paints the windows. But she still teaches 70 kids in a class. And she uses the same type of digital tools that she could have very easily have used on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. So that's this movement from A to D, okay? And the teacher dictates how they want to move. It's not a case of anybody else saying you have to move like this because I tell you to. The teacher dictates, okay? Now, if we look at Brian, now Brian is maybe a teacher whose class is always noisy. You walk past the corridors and the kids are on the floor and they're outside on the playground working on posters and making dramas, and his class is always noisy, and the principal just shakes his head because when visitors come, he walks a long way around Brian's class. You know that teacher, but the kids love Brian's classes because they're so creative, and Brian will set them a goal of, I want you to make a lesson about X, Y, Z, and I want you to go and teach your friends, or I want you to make a play about these biological problems that we experience. Or, the kids have to go and count all the cars and then decide how they're going to analyze the data and evaluate the data. So Brian's class is very much, if we think of Bloom's, at the higher order thinking, and the children have a lot of space to make educational decisions. So in this space, we say he's using self-directed learning techniques, where he's encouraging students to take charge of what they want to do. But he doesn't use technology. So he would say to the kids, okay, when you go home, you can go and look at home at this on websites, and then you can come and share the information at school. Or he would say, when you work out, and this is a real true example, when you want to analyze the data and the quantitative data, then all the cars that you counted, you can use your calculator, or you can use the calculator on your phone. And now I'm integrating technology. Or you can use of words on your phone. So Brian is very much letting the kids do some of the work, but he's really not interested in technology. Now we go over to Sina. And what Sina does is, in her classroom, Sina has exactly the same kind of approach to teaching, but she lets the students make decisions around technology. So she needs to know, these are all the range of digital tools that I can use. And so I can tell my students, this is a good one for what you want to do. This is a good one for what you want to do. But her pedagogical knowledge has to be so rich that she's able to say, for this lesson, I'm going to start at B and I'm going to move to C. And C, I'm going to get my students to collect data with their phones, use a Google form on their phone that they've developed themselves, and then use the data to analyze it in the Google Sheet, all the data that they've collected in the Google Sheet. They've got to analyze it, and then they have to present it. And the students can say, we want to present it as a newsreel or as a blog. Or so there's a lot more self-directed learning, a lot more decisions that the student is doing. So what I mean by if they're in C or B, it's very much the students doing the work, the students making decisions about what they want to do, the students leading where they want to go. But the teacher knows the pedagogical reason for what they have to do, and they're always the one guiding, shaping, helping them move in the spaces.
So if you had to look at the model, and if a teacher had to say to you, I'm really frustrated because at school I'm being pressurized to use technology and I really do want to try, what would you say to those teachers?
So again, this comes down to the fact of what do you feel comfortable doing? So if you're at a space where you're like Anna and you feel you want to start using technology because the principal is putting pressure on you, that could be one reason, or you're putting pressure on yourself and you're saying, we've got these new tablets at the school, that we've got Wi-Fi at the school now, what can I do differently? So one of the things that you need to consider is that this change isn't a one-way change. It's not a case of just starting to use technology. It's very often a complex change, and I've broken it down here into two types of change. So if you want to teach like Sina, but you're teaching mostly like Anna, the change is not just a vertical change to start using technology. It's also to change your mindset around teaching. So the teaching isn't just around directive teaching, using directive instruction, but it's also a pedagogical move. And you've got to realize as a teacher, you can't just flip-flop between pedagogies. You've got to recognize it takes work, it takes energy, it takes strategy to say to yourself, I'm going to start teaching using a constructivist approach. I'm going to start teaching, getting my students to do this, this, and this. And then when you're a teacher, please teachers, and I hope you hear my heart here, don't go and say to yourself, you must do everything in one go. Take small bites. Take the class that you love, the nice class, the class that are going to make a lesson work, and try this constructivist pedagogical move first. Try with them, the ones that are not going to cause you to want to run out in tears. Try this move first with them, because I can hear the teachers going, you haven't seen my grade 9s. You have no idea. Well, then don't start the movement with the grade 9s. Start the movement with the grade 10s that are, the nice class, or the grade 7s, or the grade 8s, or whatever your nice class is. And you say to yourself, I'm going to start this without technology. I'm going to move from Anna to Brian. I'm going to change from teaching with a direct instruction, and I'm going to get my students to start making decisions. When that could be your one movement. And then when you're comfortable with that pedagogical movement, then you can say, I'm now going to let them use technologies in this space. Alternatively, you can say, I want to get comfortable first with the technology. I want to build up confidence. When I've got confidence, then I'll be able to move pedagogically. Then you say, okay, learn how to use different devices, learn how to use a tablet, learn how to use a projector, and then do the movement from quadrant A to quadrant D. Do this movement first. Continue teaching like you normally would, but do the movement from A to D first. Then, when you're comfortable with the technology yourself, because it's always so difficult when a student asks you, ma'am, this doesn't work, or ma'am, I don't know how to do that, to all of a sudden know how to manage this. And if you've got loads of kids in your class, to now all of a sudden have, this doesn't work, I can't connect. A teacher who's not comfortable is going to get very flustered. A teacher who is comfortable is also going to get flustered with 30 different questions. So move in this direction first. If you're not familiar with technology, move from A to D. When you're comfortable with the technology, you're confident, then you can start moving over pedagogically and say, now how do I get my students to make videos of a play that they're performing, or if they've got a science lesson and you want them to video the steps in the scientific process that they're following, and then make a video at the end of it to show this is what I did for this experiment. Now it becomes them working with the technology, them analyzing, evaluating, but you need to make sure that you're comfortable with this move over here.
Yeah, that's very true. And I agree with the idea that you start with the class that you enjoy working with most and have that engagement, because the frustration, one, if your technology is not working and you now having to cope. So I can remember when you've planned this amazing lesson and then the Wi-Fi is not strong enough because suddenly you've got a whole class of tablets on and that's never been done before. And so those kinds of things just destroy lessons. And then the other frustration that the teachers then have to cope with is teaching time is so precious. If you lose a lesson, you've lost it. You can't really get it back. So it's making sure that it works so that you can do the learning and the teaching with your students that you want to do and still change the way you're working. So it's not a simple solution, it's complex. And I agree with take baby steps. Become comfortable with it and see how that can help you.
Exactly. And make sure that you move at your own pace. Don't feel that you should be pressurized to teach like Sina or teach like Brian.
Yeah.
Move at your pace and say to yourself, what I'm doing is great, and I want to always constantly evolve and change. And that's why I love the Evolve School process, because it's all about how do I as a teacher evolve my own teaching. So really, that's so critical. What I want to do here is I just want to give our viewers a little bit of a case study. There's 4 of them to help you to
be lovely. Okay.
To help you to say, this is where this teacher is at. This is where this teacher is at. So the change frame becomes, the TCF becomes something real that you can use. And I just want to quickly interrupt myself. There is a far more complex version of the change frame out there, and if you go and Google it, you'll probably find this really complex change frame. But I really wanted to make this into a simple tool that every person can quickly understand and quickly use. So if you see the complex one, it probably makes sense to lots of people, but if it doesn't work for you, just use the simple one. Okay, so this lesson here, it starts with case study 1. The learners bring their cell phones to video each other's experiments in the lab. They can then rewatch themselves doing the experiment and see where they made mistakes or where they made inaccurate measurements. So
Sorry, Isabel, are you showing us a different picture? Because we can't see it.
Can you see on the side it says case 1?
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that big so we can see that much better. Okay. So I've done that now. Great.
So what it is, it's here we're looking at this case study. When you're doing the scientific process, when your students are doing experiments, one of the things that we need to teach them is how to make accurate observations. It's one part of the scientific process that we're teaching them. And very often, teaching them to make accurate observations and accurate measurements is quite a difficult thing if they don't understand what it is you're actually teaching them. So now you get them to video how they conduct an experiment, how they do the measurements, how they do their observations, and they rewatch it themselves and they can create their own observations, their own measurements. So now we have a functionally different application of technology to help the learning. So in this space, you wouldn't say it's in quadrant B because Brian wouldn't use it. The students are doing experiments, they're watching and rewatching and analyzing, so we know it's in quadrant C. So if we think it's quadrant C, then yes, that's it. That's the one where you go. If you guessed it was quadrant C, you're right. Okay.
It's fantastic.
So, if you could make this one a little bit bigger again, then we can read.
I'll do that. Yes.
So now, which teacher is this one? This teacher says, I heard that there are tablets in the school, but I haven't used them. We mostly work with textbooks, and with 45 learners in my class, my focus is mainly on getting them to remember the most important facts that'll get them to pass. So which one do you think this one is, Karen?
Come on, put some, if you're watching, put some in the comments. If some people want to comment, that'll be great if you put some in the comments. So
I would love, yeah.
So I heard that there are tablets in the school, but haven't used them yet. We mostly work from textbooks. And with 45 learners in my class, what focus is mainly on getting them to remember the work. So I would say this is quadrant A.
And that's exactly right. Let's go and see what it says. If we click on quadrant A, and you're right. There we go. So, perfect. Now, let's see if you read the next one. Please go and put in the chat what you think. This one is in the comment section. My learners do tons of collaborative problem-based projects each week. Sina keeps telling me of the great online tools I can use, but I just haven't been able to access these yet. Now we just use good old paper. Which one do you think this is?
Oh, no. Come on, everybody. What do you think? Don't be shy. Is anybody brave enough to put a comment in about what you think it is?
Is this quadrant A, B, C, and D?
So we do tons of collaborative problem-solving projects for each topic. But if you look there, I can't use the online tools, and because I'm not able to access them. For now, we use good old paper. So who would this be? Do you think it would be D? Do you think it would be B? I think it would be B, because he's doing collaborative. So Louis also said, there we go. We've got also another B.
Fabulous. Let's have a look.
Yay!
There we go. You're absolutely right. It's no technology, but using a constructivist approach. So definitely quadrant B. And the fourth one, the last one, the school's projector is almost always in my class lately. I use it to do all my lesson presentations and to show videos about the topics we are studying. For next term, I even made a video of myself using screencasting. So this teacher uses the technology at a very sophisticated level, making a screencast themselves, using presentations, and I bet you their PowerPoint presentations are off the charts. They've even figured out how to put a video into a PowerPoint presentation. So this teacher is really loving the technology. But is it a quadrant D? Is it a Darian teacher? Or is it a quadrant C, a Sina teacher? Which one do you think? Pop it in the comments. Let's see what you think.
So who do you think it is? Do you think it's Darian? Do you think it's Sina? This is the person who is just using technology in the most awesome way. Perhaps the lag's a bit slow. We're not seeing. Louis saying it's D. Okay,
Absolutely.
Any other suggestions? Perhaps if you also want to say why you're choosing the ones that you're choosing would also be good. And perhaps those of you who are watching want to tell us how you use technology in your classrooms, or if you've got questions, pop them in the chat. Then we can talk about those in terms of whether you use technology or whether you don't use technology, and what pedagogical or teaching strategy do you use in your classroom. That would be great. So we've got another D. So we've got 2 Ds.
Fabulous. Let's have a look. Let's see what this is. And you're completely right. D it is. And now I bet you're all asking, what is this great tool you're using? can if I put it in the comments, is it going to pop up?
Yes,
Oh,
if you
there we
put it,
go.
or if yeah, so or if you put it in the private chat, I can also pop it up for you if it's not going.
Perfect. That's going to be ideal. Let me just find this great tool so that you can all go and use it.
You want to tell everybody while you're doing the searching?
So it's there, it's in the chat. If you'll put it into the comments, that'll be fantastic. This tool is called Genially, and I discovered it a little while ago. So if you're using technology and you want to use this amazing little tool, it's basically using PowerPoint skills, but you can make games, you can make all sorts of wonderful teaching tools, you can make infographics. Genially it was my best tool 2 years ago. Absolutely my favorite tool of the year. So Genially is the thing. So I don't want to go into more case studies.
Before you go away, to tell everybody, LinkedIn for some reason is not letting us send the answers to you. So that's why I've popped it up on the screen. So there you can see Genially, it's on the screen. That's how you spell it. Thanks for sharing, Isabel. That's really great.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad to be sharing good things, you know. So I don't want to actually go into the next case study. I just wanted to really bring this point home that when we use technology like this, when we think around technology, like the Teaching Change Frame helps you to think about, and you can make this smaller again if you want, Karen. There we go. So when we think around technology, I really want to emphasize that a teacher makes the pedagogical decisions first and foremost. And then when we go and say, I'm going to teach with technology, the pedagogical decision, the reason why I'm teaching in a certain way, that drives my teaching and learning. And when you feel that you've got to use technology for window dressing or to impress someone, or that shouldn't be the reason. It should be, can I constructively teach this lesson without technology, or can I bring technology in to fundamentally change how I teach this lesson? And when I can use technology like that scientific process I was showing you, it's so difficult to get students to learn why they're making incorrect observations or why their measurements are incorrect. But the technology helps you to do the teaching better. Then that's why you use the technology.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely. It must make your teaching better or help the children to learn better. It must not be the babysitter. It must not just be for the sake of using it because somebody says you must use it. And I think that's the whole mindset we've got to get teachers to realize, that you must find the value in it. Find tools which can really help you. Find ones which will make your lessons meaningful to you for the subject content that you're doing. So the same tools are not going to be useful perhaps for all teachers because we teach different grades, we teach different subjects. So, and we've also got our own personality. So it's, what do you like? What are the kinds of things that will help you in terms of your teaching? I think that we've got to get people to start, for me, it's playing. Start playing with the technology outside of the classroom. Just go into the App Store and Google the topic you want and see what apps pop up. And go into, on your computer, just go and Google and see how you find tools. I mean, Isabel, you were talking about playing with the different animation tools, and because you're trying to find one that you really like. And that's what you got to do. As teachers, we must just go and play, find time to play, because once you feel comfortable with those tools, then you can start saying, oh, I could use it in this lesson, or, oh, this will be great for this kind of activity. And that's what you want. You don't want it to be an add-on. It must be part of what you're doing so that it's really meaningful. So I'm just so excited that you've shared this evening. And those case studies are just so lovely that we can show teachers how easy it is to actually think about the way we teach. Because often I think schools also don't think of the pedagogies. They say to you, you've got to use the tool, but they don't actually talk about the way we actually teaching. And I think the two must go hand in hand. so that we're actually looking at what kind of teacher am I? And I think sometimes we even forget to reflect on it. Sort of, we move into teaching and sort of studied long ago, and then you forget about it, and somebody says, oh, but are you using constructivist kind of teaching, or are you using direct kind of instruction? And people will say, oh, what does that mean? And so I think creating an awareness of pedagogies and how we use them, because sometimes people are using them without actually having remembered or even taught the kinds of theories. And so I think it's saying to people, there are these theories, go and read and research them as well. So making people aware again of learning. And I think as teachers, if we think about being lifelong learners, that just makes life so much better from both an academic and a technological usage point of view.
No, absolutely. And then added to that is also, how do I assess? So not just how do I teach with technology, but how do I use technology to assess with? And very often we want to just take a paper-based test and throw it onto a Google form or a Microsoft form, and now it functionally doesn't change the assessment. The assessment stays the same if you're using technology to get them to do exactly the same thing on a device versus writing it on paper. It doesn't change the assessment. So if you're going to move over to CINA, you've got to start thinking, how do I get my students involved in the assessment? How do I get my students to make decisions around assessment? How do they self-assess? How do they peer assess? And that process isn't devoid of teaching. Very often we think the teacher is in charge of the assessment and not the students. But when you're moving over pedagogically, you also need to move over with assessment as well. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few minutes left, but definitely. And I think if we also think about assessment as not this odd thing we do at the end of the term, but it's something that you're continually doing throughout the term, and then incorporating the children into that assessment just becomes so much more meaningful. And I suppose over the years, I learned that because I taught design and technology. And so your children, in terms of the process, are evaluating all the time. So you're getting them to be involved, and you're getting them to a space where they actually writing the evaluation questions. And then you start thinking, oh, but you could be doing this in every subject. It doesn't just have to be in one subject. Think about how you can be getting the children to be designing their own questions, and that they then are creating assessments or whatever you want to call them, evaluations, but getting the children to think of the questions. For me, I always think a really great idea would be to flip our assessments. That if you gave children a whole lot of answers and you then said to them, okay, you now go and write the questions, and the children who wrote the higher order thinking questions got the higher marks rather than just the knowledge and recall. So get the children to be thinking about the questions. But if we're not teaching like that, we can't expect our children to cope.
Exactly. And we need to teach them how to assess. As much as we need to teach them how to think, how to create, how to innovate, we need to teach them how to assess. And that's where my final point comes in, is that if we have all these highfalutin ideas around the world, we've got to create these children who are 21st century learners, and they must create and innovate, and we've got all these highfalutin ideas. But the question is, I can only teach what I know. If I can't innovate my practice, how am I going to get my students to learn how to innovate? If I can't create these amazing ideas and come up with these novel approaches, how am I going to teach my students to be creative? So, like you said earlier, it starts with you. If you want to be the teacher that teaches the most innovative lessons, that's going to rub off on your students. You can only teach what you know. Teach yourself, go and innovate, go and play, because the minute you play and you innovate, you start modeling that. And mostly our students do what we do. They don't always do what we say, but what we do, they'll go and emulate.
Yes. So, Isabel, I just want to say thank you so much for this fantastic chat this evening. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for being willing to be here this evening. And just thank you for all the wonderful examples and tips that you've given everybody. So to all of you who participated this evening, we say thank you to you for being happy to be guinea pigs. And I'm going to close the chat for this evening. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Everyone, bye then.